Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kirby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. We're going to be covering a lot of different topics over the next 2 hours, so hang with us as we go through some of those very important issues. And the first one, we're going to start in studio, since we have our good friend Jimmy Meeks in studio. He's been a retired police officer, and he is a church safety advisor with Sheepdog Safety Training. Has been retired for a number of years now, and he and Dave Grossman travel all over the country. As a matter of fact, he just came back from all the speaking that he has been doing, and we want to cover a couple of issues. First of all, church safety. Second of all, there's some pieces of legislation, one in the Texas Legislature, another one in Alabama, and we'll talk about some of those pieces of legislation that are really important in just a minute. And, of course, as I was sharing with you, Jimmy, off air, I was just driving back from Oklahoma, went through Dangerfield, and, of course, you were married at First Baptist Church in Dangerfield, which is actually the site of the first church shooting that we can talk about in modern times.
Yes, sir. Actually, the first one was in 1974 with 3 people, but the first massacre was Dangerfield.
Yeah, major
Martin
one.
Luther King's mother was killed in a church in 74.
Wow.
A lot of folks don't know that, but in 1980, in East Texas, a man walked in, shouted, "This is war." He had 4 guns on him, 2 rifles, 2 handguns, 400 bullets. He was wearing 2 vests and an army helmet. He was going to go to trial the next day. He had been sexually assaulting his daughter for over a dozen years, and he knew his days were numbered. He walked in, shouted, "This is war."
Yeah.
And shot 15 people and killed 5. And I still go over there a lot. My grandmother lived there. She died 2 years ago, Kirby, but you can still feel the hurt in that area. That's the horrible thing about violence, is it lingers so long. It lingers.
And not far from where we're broadcasting right now, one that probably got everybody's national attention, which was in a Christian church as well. But part of it, Jimmy, is that we sort of have this feeling that we're somewhat safe in church because we don't hear a lot of these stories, unless it's a Dylan Roof who walks in and then it has a racial component, a white man killing black people. Even just the other day, you had a shooting, and I doubt anybody except you and the maybe 2 or 3 other people in the country know about that. And so
yes, I believe it was yesterday in West Virginia.
Right.
A man killed somebody in church and stole 3 cars and then killed himself. But here's the real issue, Kirby. We have now surpassed, since 1999.
Yes.
Wedgwood is the shooting you were probably referring to a while ago. 14 shot, September 15th, 1999, 7 killed. But since 1999, over 700 people have died a violent death while on church or faith-based property. Now, some people may say, well, that doesn't sound like a whole lot. But, folks, that's about every week somebody's being murdered at church and faith-based property. It's not always church. Sometimes it's faith-based property, but still, people have it in their mind that if it's religious property, God is somehow indebted to protecting it. Yeah. Even though Jesus said, be on your guard against men, they will hurt you in the house of worship. So this stuff is happening all the time. And when you put those number of deaths up against school shootings, last time I checked, we are slightly ahead. And this is not a race we want to win. You're just as likely, if not more likely, to be murdered on church property as you are at a school.
Yeah. And again, that's the point I wanted to drive home, is that we hear about the school shootings, and those are horrible. And we hear about the individuals that go into movie theaters and have shootings there. We sometimes don't hear about churches and things of that nature. And part of it, I think, is there are a lot of people that don't go to church or synagogue or even a mosque. They don't really know people that do. So it's sort of out of sight, out of mind, and it isn't well covered. But it brings us back to the key issue that we've had you in so many times before. You're doing these seminars all over the country. Went on your website, and it wears me out just looking at all the places you've been.
I'm tired. I'm falling asleep as you talk, and you're an interesting person. So I just got back from Arizona a couple days ago.
But you and Dave Grossman have been really traveling the country educating individuals on how to do church safety. But I wanted to highlight a couple of pieces of legislation. And so for the moment, we're going to talk about our people in the state of Texas, but we also want everybody around the country to learn, because sometimes these are model pieces of legislation. But you've got a bill in Congress right now, actually in the House of Texas House, written by one of the individuals we've actually had on this program many times before, church protection. And talk about that, because it seems to me that this would provide another way in which churches could protect themselves.
Yes, sir. Well, Kirby, in the state of Texas, the law is it's not clear. It's kind of muddy as to what a church can do to protect itself.
Right.
There are some opinions that have been issued by the Attorney General, but still the occupations code and everything tied into the law is just not clear about what a church can do. But most agree that what churches cannot do is that you cannot turn to somebody that's got a concealed handgun permit and say, hey, Joe, you've got your permit. Why don't you serve as security? That's against the law. That'll get you in trouble.
Yes.
But House Bill 421, introduced by Matt Rinaldi, and Matt, if you're listening, sir, we acknowledge you and thank God for you. But if House Bill 421, which is presently in the Calendar Committee and trying to make its way to the floor, if it passes, what it says to churches is, you are free to do whatever you deem necessary to protect your flock, as long as you stay within the confines of the law. In other words, if 5 men join your church that just got out of prison, they got saved, and you say, we like you guys, start bringing your bazookas to church or whatever, you can't do that.
No.
If you're going to use somebody that's armed, they need to have a permit. Or if you don't want to have anybody armed, here's the glory of this bill, Kirby. It's a religious liberty law.
Yes, it sure is.
And it simply says, churches, we're going to leave you alone. All we ask is that you stay within the confines of the law. Don't break any laws, and don't wear a uniform. They are going to put that in. Don't wear a uniform or a badge, which is a good thing. You don't want any, John Wayne or Dirty Harry wannabes.
Yeah.
But if House Bill 421 passes, it says to all 30,000 churches in the state of Texas, stay within the law. And you no longer have to concern yourself with, are we breaking some kind of law? Because churches that set up any kind of security team, even those without a gun, number one, if you have a gun, you're breaking the law if you're using those guys as security. But any kind of security team could put you in trouble because there are laws about security.
Yes.
So this will do for us what many of the blue states get to do.
Isn't that funny?
And I know you probably didn't know that, did you?
No, I did not until you told me that off air, because I thought, well, this is what we're going to need for every state in the union.
They're way ahead of us, Kirby.
But Oregon, Washington, things like that would already allow that to take place. But it's the state of Texas and a few others. We're going to Oklahoma's another good example.
Yeah, Oklahoma has too many restrictions.
Yes. Okay.
But a lot of the states are just saying, hey, like Missouri, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, they just leave the churches alone. And here's the good thing. Some of the opponents of this bill, which will be security companies because it's their bread and butter, or it's really not, but someone wants you to think it is, they're going to argue you can't do that. These people can't be trusted. But we're not doing anything. You're going to find a few examples of some things that some people who had a gun or a knife or however they chose to protect themselves did something wrong. But it's not the good people that are doing things wrong. It's the bad people that come in and pose the threat. But the good thing about this bill, Kirby, is it's not about guns, knives, pepper spray, police batons, or tasers. This is about saying to churches, you are free. Just stay within the limits of the law. Don't break any laws. Follow the laws, the criminal code, and what have you. And, we wish you the best. Just don't wear a uniform.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'm going to open up for some calls because Jimmy's going to be here for a short time, and we're going to let him go back and rest. We have, as they say in West Texas, ridden you hard and put him up wet. So we're going to give him here just a few more minutes to answer some of your questions. But when we come back, those of you in the South, in particular, I want to talk about Alabama. This is a piece of legislation in Alabama that Briarwood Presbyterian Church is considering, and that's a little bit different. So it's the idea of even maybe having a church police force. So we're going to talk about some of that. But if you'd like to join us, if you maybe have a question or a comment about church security, this is a topic we deal with so often with Jimmy, and we'll do him again before he gets out on the road. 800-351-1212. Perhaps you have a comment or a question. We might take those calls, and we have a lot more to talk about, but we'll have to wait to the other side of the break. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Yesterday, I talked about entitlement addiction. Today, I want to focus on how hard it is to wean Americans off of other government programs. Joe Messina begins a column by citing some of the recommendations given by pediatricians about when to wean a young child off of breast milk. For example, a 2-year-old toddler may be more attached and less flexible about giving up breastfeeding than a 12-month-old baby. Joe then asks, sound familiar? Government programs work like this. I think we've all seen how a temporary government program becomes a permanent government program. When funding is about to run out, it gets extended. Soon, too many people use the program, and it is impossible to wean them off of the government. Do you love art and music? Then obviously you would oppose any attempt to reduce government funding of the arts. Joe Messina reminds us that programs like Sesame Street and plays like Hamilton are making lots of money off of seed money from taxpayers. Sesame Street is worth over $400 million alone. Many programs are no longer necessary. The Rural Utilities Service was started in 1930 to get phones and electricity into rural areas. It fulfilled its mission but still exists to this day. The Rural Housing Service was created in 1949 to provide low-interest loans to farmers, but has changed its mission to provide loans to non-farm households in urban zip codes. What about all the controversy about Meals on Wheels? Joe Messina says that few cuts proposed are for duplicate programs that cover or encompass Meals on Wheels, and I doubt any of these programs will be cut by the time the budget makes its way through various congressional committees. Weaning toddlers can be difficult, but weaning dependence on the federal government seems almost impossible. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From PureFlix, The Case for Christ, based on the book by Lee Strobel. In theaters April 7th, rated PG. More information at caseforchristmovie.com. Point of View, Truth Team 360, Alan West.
You know, when I think about the importance of Point of View radio, it is so essential that we connect with the Christian conservative community on the issues and the topics of the day so that they can really get that information to educate and inform them to make better decisions. You know, I have two daughters, 22 and 18, and one of the things that concerns me is the impact that the culture will have upon them. And if we don't stand up as evangelical Christians, as Christian conservatives, and start to show the other points of view and start to talk about these issues that are critical out there for the building of character, the strengthening of the soul and the spirit against some of the very negative impacts of culture, then we will lose our young people. We will lose future generations. The important thing about Point of View ministry is that it arms you. It equips you to go out and do exactly as God commanded Joshua to do. To be strong and of good courage, for the Lord thy God shall never leave you nor forsake you.
Point of View, Truth Team 360.
Alan West, who has been in this actual seat with us before, because he's sometimes been a guest host and certainly been a guest around the round table. We last week, of course, talked about joining with the Truth Team, rebuilding truth in a post-truth culture. Yesterday, I mentioned that we would still take your donations, and we received a couple. So again, if you have not had a chance to join with us, a one-time gift would be appreciated. But again, let me suggest some of you might want to join at $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 a year. We have a pledge line number that you can call, 800-347-5151, or simply just go to the website, pointofview.net. That's how I give oftentimes, and it's right there, and it's a banner, and gives you a chance to join with us. And today, if you're listening and saying, boy, I can't think of anywhere else on radio, television, anywhere I've learned about church security. And I am concerned about my security in the church so that we can protect ourselves from evildoers or individuals like that. That might be another reason for you to join with us. And so we have in studio with us Jimmy Meeks, who is a part of a wonderful organization that has been working for so many years now to actually train churches in terms of safety. And we have a link to the Sheepdog Safety Training Seminar. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. And we have a full bank of phone calls. So before I get to the calls, I did want to mention Alabama, Briarwood Presbyterian Church. I've known that church for many years, know a lot of people there. I was just in Briarwood in Birmingham just not so long ago and saw some good friends out there. But they have actually said, why can't we just simply have our own police force? We have, if you think about it, churches don't have police forces, but colleges do, universities do, all sorts of other groups do. Wouldn't it make sense that churches could do?
Kirby, I would say it for two reasons. Number one, we have what's called liberty in this country.
Yes.
This is what distinguishes us from everybody outside our borders, and to a certain extent. We have this liberty, and secondly, we have this threat. Church violence started in Birmingham, Alabama, actually.
Yes.
An explosion in the church in the early 60s.
Very true.
In Alabama, just less than 2 years ago, Kirby, a man walked in, shot his girlfriend, her baby, and the preacher, Reverend Carswell, took 2 shots to both knees, 1 shot to both knees. I went to meet him the other day. He still has the bullets. You had 2 brothers stabbed in a pantry in Alabama, one in his 60s, one in his 70s, serving at the church. The threat is there. The liberty is there. If there is a church that wants to meet all the requirements of the law, and they'll have to, man, God bless them for taking it. And here's the good thing about it, Kirby, and about this House bill. This puts the people at the church responsible for their own flock. They have a vested interest.
Yes, they certainly do.
This is my flock, and Paul the Apostle said, love always protects. When Jesus got arrested, the first thing he said was, you're looking for me, let my disciples go.
Yeah.
Look at the sheepdog coming out at him.
Yeah,
I love
right.
that. So people who, give them a police department. If
Right.
These cities, loosen the reins a little bit. They're only going to help you. They're going to be qualified. They're going to be mostly retired cops.
Yeah.
That'd be the best around.
I would think so. So again, we have sheep in the church. We have the shepherd, but we don't have the sheepdog. And that's why you call it, again, sheepdogsafetytraining.com. There's a place where people can host a seminar. And of course, you guys just came off a really busy schedule. This fall, you're going to have another busy schedule, but let me encourage you to go to the website. We have a link there to the Sheepdog Safety Training Seminars, and my first article there is called Officers of the Church, and it's from World Magazine. But, Jimmy, every time you come, people have questions, so can I work our way through some of our phone calls here?
Depends whether they like me or not.
Yeah, we'll find out in just a minute.
Is she screening these things?
Yeah, she's screening there. So let's go to Georgia, first of all, on the Good News Network. Ron, I think you had a question for Jimmy Meeks. So, Ron, thank you for calling today.
Oh, thank you, Kirby. I appreciate you taking my call. I just want to make sure that I'm within the law in Georgia. I have a concealed carry permit, and it's my understanding that if my pastor gives me permission to carry at church, that I'm okay. I'm not a security force. I'm just a private citizen with a carry license that carries at church.
Well, Ron, I tell you, Georgia has had some issues. You had a minister shot while standing behind a pulpit in Atlanta. And recently you had 6 police officers shot in 6 days. 2 of them were best friends, and they're dead. There is a threat in Georgia. But what you need to do, sir, is you need to contact your church, and you need to check the law. Georgia did recently pass a law, I believe, that allows you to bring guns to churches. But you don't want, and Kirby wouldn't want me speaking here on behalf of Point of View to give lawyer advice. You need to check with your legislature or a lawyer and confirm that before you do something. Because there's also that possibility that if there's a lot of people in a church armed, Kirby, what can happen if a killer comes in if there's no kind of planned response?
Right.
And all of a sudden out come 30 guns and you lose 40 people and the killer gets away.
Yeah.
So the training that's necessary in knowing the gun laws, but I would certainly check with an attorney, sir, and call the legislature there in Georgia and confirm that before you do something and get yourself in trouble.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. God bless.
Thank you. We'll move from Georgia to North Carolina. By the way, I got to say, first of all, congratulations to the South Carolina women for winning the national championship last night. Congratulations to the North Carolina men for winning the national championship in basketball. And, of course, you also have, of course, in South Carolina, Clemson. So, I mean, this has really been good for the Carolinas. So let's go to a DJ listening in WLGP. DJ, what's your question for Jimmy Meeks?
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Kirby. I guess he kind of answered it on the last call. I'm a pastor here of a biker church in North Carolina, and about 90% of my congregation has concealed carry permits. And so I'm not quite sure.
What's wrong with that other 10% there, brother?
Well, they haven't got their permits yet. But I'm the pastor, and I honestly, I don't want to say what church I'm in because I don't know if I'm breaking the law or not.
Well, you need to check with your legislature, sir. We did a seminar in North Carolina a year ago. Got to meet Franklin Graham, had a blast. You need to make sure you know the law, and you're probably going to be okay, but understand this, sir. Colonel Grossman likes to say, men don't rise to the occasion, they sink to the level of their training. So just the fact that you have a bunch of armed people doesn't mean you're ready.
Right, I was a small arms instructor with Spec Forces for about 15 years.
Then you should know that you know better than me the necessity of training.
We're trained up, but I'm not sure about the legality. That was problems. Would the Attorney General's office be able to say?
Yes, sir. You need to get a hold of them. I believe it's in Raleigh. Is that right, Kirby? We're the capital there. Find out before you get in trouble and you do something that you regret.
And maybe again... And DJ, I just would recommend that if they have another seminar in North Carolina, even if you've got to drive a little bit, maybe you have it in Boone or you have it somewhere else.
I believe it's going to be in the spring. It's going to be in the Raleigh area.
Oh, the Raleigh area.
Yes, sheepdogseminars.com.
So go out of your way just to go there or send at least one or two representatives, and you will learn a lot from these two men.
And Kirby, I would say to people who call and ask about these states, you're calling Texas and asking about another state. I would call your legislature and find out what the law is and confirm that. And your church should be finding out. The pastor ought to be leading the way on that. He could get an answer in 30 minutes.
We have some more phone calls, and I promised I'd only keep you in for a short time, so can I wear you out and have you keep it for another segment or two?
Well, I get paid twice as much as I got paid this first 30 minutes.
I would imagine so. Hey, speaking of that, one of the things that we just talked about a minute ago is the fact that we had our very successful week last week, which is, again, our Truth Team Week, and that's just where we, again, challenge you to help us financially. Your gift really equips people to take a stand in the culture, to really make a difference. We've had a chance to last week hear from a number of individuals who, because of your gift in the past, were able to have a successful ministry and an outreach, some of those really profound indeed. And then, of course, we recognize that we have a whole new generation to train up. Tomorrow we're going to have our Millennial Roundtable here. I've already begun to post some of the articles that we're going to talk about tomorrow with Nick Pitts and with Allie Beth Stuckey and others. So that, again, just is something that we are building the leadership for the 21st century, encouraging you to do what you can to make a difference in the culture. And again, as we go to a break, let me suggest a couple of things. Number one, you can go to the website, pointofview.net. There you can find out more about Jimmy Meeks. We have the link to sheepdogsafetytraining.com, but you don't have to type it all out. We've got a link there. Just click on the See More right next to his picture, and that will take you to the Sheepdog Seminars. You can find out about whether there's going to be a seminar in your community or you can host one. And also we have that article from World Magazine about officers in the church, and you can learn a little bit more about what's happening around the country in terms of church security. But also you can click on that banner that encourages you to become part of our Truth Team. And for as little as $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 a year, you can support us, or just even a one-time gift. If you've never given before, we'd love to hear from you. And, of course, you can call our pledge line, 800-347-5151. We'll be right back.
From PureFlix comes The Case for Christ. An investigative reporter on a quest to disprove his wife's newfound faith comes face to face with an unexpected outcome.
How can we even talk about historical evidence for the resurrection?
The empty tomb is based on evidence. And isn't evidence your trade?
Based on the best-selling book by Lee Strobel, The Case for Christ. In theaters April 7th. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. More information is available at thecaseforchristmovie.com.
Christianity is based in history, on evidence, and all truth revealed in God's Word is for our good, not just spiritually, but in every way. Point of View's mission is to restore God's truth in our culture, and to do it effectively, we need you as a partner. Your gift helps inspire people, young and old, from coast to coast to rebuild truth in their communities. Join the Truth Team today at pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Get off the sidelines. Pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kirby Anderson.
Continue our conversation for a few more minutes with Jimmy Meeks. Going to keep him over. We'll probably get to some of the conversation I was going to have about Susan Rice and some of the allegations there. And if we don't, we'll certainly have time tomorrow. And I might just mention in the second hour, we're going to be talking about religious terrorism. And let's face it, most of the attacks right now in houses of worship, whether it's a church, a synagogue, or even a mosque, and really only a few killings have been in mosques. So most of these have been in churches and synagogues. But nevertheless, most of the time, these are individuals that are high on drugs. They're criminals. They're looking for a soft target. They're angry with God or whatever. But some of those, as we'll talk about in the second hour, could be religiously motivated, Muslims or radical Muslims and things like that. And that's why we just need to pay attention to this.
Pay attention.
And recognize that we have a pastor who's the shepherd. We have the congregation, which are sheep, but we need sheepdogs, right?
Well, we need the sheepdogs, Kirby, because we have a fourth person, the wolf.
The wolf.
And the wolf will devour. He cares nothing for the flock, and he will come in and hurt.
Let's, if we can, go back to, in this case, Georgia. Listen to Brenda. I think she wanted to share a little bit about what their church is doing, and we can then maybe from Jimmy learn a little bit more about what we can do in our own churches. So, Brenda, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Kirby. Thank you, Jimmy. I'm so glad you're having this conversation because I've talked to other Christians from different churches, and they seem to think it's un-Christ-like to think about, having guns in the church, that, God will protect us. They over-spiritualize it. But I joined this church 5 months ago, and I was happy to find out that it's a pastor, husband and wife team that lead the church. And their security ministry or team are all correction officers or police officers. Mm-hmm. The armor bearer for the husband and wife each have an armor bearer. The wife's armor bearer is a woman who's now in the military, career military woman, and the husband's armor bearer is a police officer. And everybody on the security team are licensed to carry concealed weapons, and they carry. And another thing is that the pastor told us, he said, the Bible said to watch as well as pray. So he said, whenever he has us to pray, he said, okay, bow your heads, but you can keep your eyes open because we got to watch, He said, nobody's going to get past us. What happened in South Carolina, unfortunately, is not going to happen to us. So I think it's just wisdom. I think they're using wisdom. God's people have to use wisdom.
That's
yes,
right.
ma'am. And I'll tell you what I would tell you, too. When people say, Kirby, this is something you're going to want to elaborate on.
Sure.
When they say, the Lord will protect us, 90,000 Christians were murdered last year in this world.
Oh, yeah. Oh wow.
90,000 Christians were murdered. And for the second year in a row, Christians were the most hated people's group in the world.
Right.
Why didn't God protect them?
That's a good point. And Brenda, a good verse that I always like to say is, in the book of Nehemiah, what did Nehemiah tell those individuals? They told them to build the wall, but also to carry a weapon. So they called for them to pray, they called for them to build, and they also called for them to protect. So there was no contradiction in Nehemiah's mind between having a sword and protecting you from any invaders and building a wall and also praying and trusting the Lord.
Nehemiah 4:9. Yeah. We prayed to our God and posted a guard. I like what she said too, Kirby. The Bible never tells us to bow our heads and close our eyes. And one of the survivors in Charleston said, and I quote, he got us with our eyes closed.
Yeah, Dylan Roof.
He waited until their heads were bowed and their eyes were closed, and then he took them out. He'd been there for 1 hour. He prayed with them. He read the Bible with them. He was wearing winter clothing in summertime.
Yeah, there was something obviously wrong.
Yeah, you gotta, something in Reverend Simmons, who was also killed that night. Did you see the interview with his son? He testified at the trial, Kirby, and he said, I don't understand my father, Reverend Simmons. He very protective, and he always carried a gun. And when the coroner gave me the keys to his car, and I went and got his car, his gun was in the front seat. And he said my daddy carried a gun even in church. We're talking about one of the men killed in Charleston in June of 2015. And, folks, I'm not a gun fanatic. Kirby, I own 2 guns. I'm not a gun fanatic, but when a bad guy shows up, and he's going to hurt my wife or my son, my daughters, my friend Kirby or his daughters and family, I'm ready to stand before God and say, Father, I defended your flock.
Yeah.
And we ask people, how come we ask pastors all the time when they say, we don't understand why you do this. We love the flock.
Yes.
We love them. Love protects. And I don't understand sometimes how people think like this. And it just blows my mind. You don't have enough love to protect. And you know something? If you don't want to have a gun, do something. Do what Red McDaniel did at the church where I was married, where 15 people were shot and 5 killed. Go after the attacker. Be willing to die. We tell them in our seminar, somebody's going to have to die. Somebody's going to have to go after Goliath like David rushed after Goliath. Go after him. If you're not into guns, that's fine. It's the right to carry, not the responsibility to carry. All right, so have something in place where you're at least going to tackle the guy or go after the guy. Don't let him come in there and murder everybody. I've even had people say, well, Kirby, Jimmy, if he comes in there and shoots us, we'll go to heaven. You think everybody in your church that gets shot is going to go straight to heaven? What if he ends up killing all the unbelievers? And you could have saved him. So do what you have to do.
You know, you mentioned also that Dylan Roof was in the back, but the individual that shot the people in the movie theater in Aurora, didn't he go
James
to a
Holmes.
church? Yeah.
Well, a pastor that saw him on TV, when he looked at him, said, oh, my goodness. That man sat on the back row of my church 2 weeks ago for 5 minutes and left.
Yeah, and he could have shot the people in the church.
He could have shot them.
Instead
I think what
of
he
in
was
the movie
doing,
theater.
he was casing it.
He's casing it.
He's looking for a soft target, then he picks a theater. And I've listened to the audio. I've listened to the audio of that killing 3 days ago, Kirby. Carl Chin, one of our team members, plays it. Every 6 shots that you hear, somebody's dead. And the downside of this is when we ask people to protect their flock, is this stuff haunts you forever. A friend of mine, Kirby, that saw the shooting at the church that I was married in 36 years ago this year. His name was Russell May. He was 11 years old. He jumped up and he watched it. He began to spiral downward that day. And Kirby, he killed himself 3 years ago. 3 years and 2 months ago, Russell killed himself.
And this happened, in 1980, if I remember
right?
Yes,
June of 1980, 2014, he takes his life.
You generate a lot of phone calls. You want to take a few more here?
Oh, I love being here.
Okay. Well, we're going to head all the way up to the state of Alaska. I'm going to be there.
We were going to be there this week.
Yeah, you were supposed to be in Wasilla, but you moved that one. But you were going to be in Wasilla in the future, aren't you?
Yes, sir. Wasilla sent people down.
I'll be in Fairbanks,
Saturday.
and I'm going to be in North Pole and a few places like that. But anyway, Eugene, I think you wanted to ask a question or make a comment, so you have the floor.
Hi there. I attend a local church in Fairbanks, and I carry my little friend with me, 29, no matter where I go. As you're probably aware, Alaska has very liberal conceal or open carry laws.
Right.
I do have a concealed carry permit because I visit my family in Florida. And so we have a 35-state reciprocal agreement, which helps. But as far as I know, there's no restrictions, no laws about carrying in church or not carrying in church or using the weapon in church or anything like that in Alaska. It would be good if our church could go through the program, although I do practice at the local range, but those are on paper targets.
Well, you're going to be up in Alaska in the future.
Well, yes, we were supposed to be there, brother.
Yeah, you were supposed to be there in a few days.
Saturday.
Let's remember.
I can't hear both of you. Who?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I'm wearing headphones now. It's changed a little bit for me. We were supposed to be in Wasilla this coming Saturday, but it just fell through the first time that's happened. But we're going to reschedule. Wasilla sent some people down to Tucson this past week and checked us out, and they just fell in love with it. So we'll be up there soon. Just watch the website, sheepdogseminars.com, and who doesn't want to go to Alaska? I mean,
yeah.
Who doesn't want to go?
Yeah, that's all good. Just before we go, again, as we go to your seminar schedule, we can find out if there's already a seminar in the community. But you have a little button here, how to host a seminar in your city. Mm-hmm. And it would be good if a couple churches came together, because it's certainly a lot better for you to have maybe a half a dozen churches or more all come to the seminar. So a pastor listening to this right now, an elder, a deacon, a Bible fellowship leader, they say, okay, what's my next step to bring you there to learn more about what we can do to protect our own church?
Well, get a hold of us, and we're a very different seminar. We're two seminars rolled into one. Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, former West Point psychology professor, author of award-winning books, Army Ranger. He's going to do the Bulletproof Mind, which is great for the police in your area. Mm-hmm. Kirby, we had 64 police officers murdered by gunfire last year.
That's right.
64. I was in Dallas the night those police officers were killed. I went down there to hear the protesters just to see what they were saying, and the anger and was so thick you could tell something was fixing to happen. So Colonel Grossman comes with us, and he does the Bulletproof Mind. I bring Carl Chin with me. Carl Chin was working for James Dobson in 96 when a gunman showed up.
Yes. Carl
ended up being one of the hostages. He survived that and thought, I'll never go through that again, but he did.
Mm-hmm.
11 years later at New Life Church, he was face-to-face with a killer.
That's right.
That he was about to shoot, and a former police officer came out of nowhere and killed him. So get a hold of us. And we were in North Phoenix Baptist Church. Remember Richard Jackson? We were at his former church this past Saturday. We were in Tucson the day before. We would love to come to your area. Contact me about the details. It's a very spiritual seminar, too. We include a 15-minute session on the importance of fasting. In the Bible, fasting stops violence.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to get a gun, maybe you could skip a meal and cry out to the Lord.
Well, Jimmy, thank you for coming by here. You have been on the road and are going to let you get a rest, and then we're going to get you back here again because there's so much more to find out about. We have information about House Bill 421, also what's happening in Alabama. We'll see you again soon. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Thomas Altman, Kristen Larson, and Kenneth Yackley were employed by the Minnesota Department of Corrections. Like many government agencies do, the state agency assembled employees for training on non-discrimination in the workplace. Well, these employees did not agree with the politically correct bent of this particular training, but they were nonetheless required to attend. While several employees disliked the training out of sheer boredom, Altman and his colleagues had a moral objection to the content of the training. So ahead of the training, the three agreed to participate minimally and read their Bibles silently to themselves. While they read their Bibles in silent protest, other employees nodded off, did paperwork, or read a secular publication of some sort. After the training session, the three Bible-reading employees were issued a letter of reprimand. Those who fell asleep or read the newspaper or did paperwork were not punished at all. So Altman and friends sued the Department of Corrections. The Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit sent the case back to the district court, noting that the court should have allowed the jury to determine whether the employer was motivated to punish these employees because of their religious activity. Religious discrimination in the workplace is unlawful, but sometimes it takes a jury to determine whether an employer's actions were motivated by hostility toward religion. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Point of View. Truth Team 360.
Point of View is actually a lifeline for me. I homeschool my girls, and I don't think I could do what I do without Point of View on a daily basis.
I've been listening for about 26 years. I just wanted to say that y'all have helped me a lot because you've given opportunity to call our congressman and make phone calls, write letters and all, and I've signed up yesterday to be a supporter, and I think it's well worth it.
First of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it. Not only that, I want to encourage everybody listening to donate, because without our donations, I know that y'all won't be able to stay on the air, and it's just, I don't know where we get this kind of information if it wasn't from y'all.
Point of View. Truth Team 360.
Back once again. Of course, we had Jimmy Meeks over a little bit longer because some of you wanted to ask some other questions, make some comments. And just before in the second hour, we get to a very serious discussion of a new book dealing with religious terrorism. And it kind of follows up on some of that. I wanted to cover a couple of other items in the news, one of which everybody's been talking about. And we've kind of postponed it until we had some more definitive evidence. But if you saw the Bloomberg article the other day, you had Eli Lake, in which he wrote that White House lawyers last month learned that the former National Security Advisor Susan Rice requested the identities of U.S. persons in raw intelligence reports in dozens of occasions that connect to the Donald Trump transition and campaign, and that according to U.S. officials. They went on to say that the pattern of Rice's requests were discovered in a National Security Council review of the government's policy on unmasking the identities of individuals who are not the targets of electronic eavesdropping, but also whose communications are collected incidentally. Normally those names are redacted from the summaries with reports that just say U.S. person one. What they're talking about is that when we are oftentimes eavesdropping, surveilling, or sometimes the old-fashioned word wiretapping individuals that we're looking at, that could be like the Russian ambassador, for example, the individuals that they are talking to, if they're American citizens, are redacted. In other words, they're masked. But now the argument that is coming from especially U.S. Attorney Joseph DeGeneva is that Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor under Barack Obama, actually required that we would unmask certain individuals. And so what he said is what was produced by the intelligence community at the request of Susan Rice were detailed spreadsheets of these intercepted phone calls with unmasked Trump associates in perfectly legal conversations with individuals. And so the overheard conversations involve, as he said, no illegal activity, but the apparent illegal activity was the unmasking of the people in those calls. Now, one of those would be a lieutenant general that was just lost his job, Michael Flynn. So you can see that, first of all, we know that if there was any kind of inappropriate activity, those unmasking transcripts probably not only exist in the hands of Susan Rice, but probably a half a dozen, if not a dozen more people, probably people in the media. And the fact that we've heard nothing about it shows that probably nothing went wrong. As a matter of fact, that's what you're starting to hear, not just from the Republican people investigating this, but even some of the Democratic people as well. But the bigger story is, well, why was all of this targeting and unmasking taking place? So this is something we're going to be following for some time. And of course, it's what Representative Devin Nunes, who is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, has been investigating. The argument was he actually had to go to the area near the White House called the Executive Office Building to actually see some of this, because that was the only place where he could see that. Of course, there today have been all sorts of individuals reacting differently to this. You have Fox News covering this extensively. You have other networks not covering it at all or saying don't pay attention to this because this is all pretty much irrelevant. And as you might imagine, Susan Rice, as she was on a number of programs today, including MSNBC, actually categorically denied that the Obama administration inappropriately spied on, at that time, candidate Donald Trump, now President Donald Trump, or members of his transition team. But nevertheless, we do have evidence that at least one Trump transition member was unmasked, leading to the claims that they intended to use some of that to damage the Trump transition. So we'll see how that story goes. I'm posting some of these articles for our tomorrow conversation, and we'll certainly have more about that on Friday. But also, the second article I've posted here today was one I referred to yesterday, but it's a very extensive, it would take me too long to read all of it, but it's a very extensive summary of all the things that President Donald Trump has done, and in so doing has really undone many of the policies of Barack Obama. This is an Associated Press story, and the title of it is Bit by Bit, Trump Methodically Undoing Obama Policies. Now, the writer, Darlene Superville, seems to be writing as of, isn't this lamentable that all the things that President Barack Obama accomplished are now being undone by President Donald Trump. But as we go through some of the things that we look at being undone, those are the very things that for many years those of us around this table here at Point of View wanted to do. Let me just take the issue of abortion, for example. She said, Donald Trump is expected to sign legislation erasing another Obama rule that barred states from withholding federal family planning funds from Planned Parenthood affiliates and other clinics. Well, actually, that was voted on in the United States Senate. And this was actually finalized by President Obama just before he left office in January. The measure cleared the Senate, as I might point out, by Vice President Mike Pence casting the tie-breaking 51st vote. She doesn't go on to say something that just happened yesterday, and that is we have indirectly been funding abortion, especially the one-child policy in China for many years. That has been overturned as well. You can then look at all sorts of other issues we've talked about, whether it's reversing the decision by President Obama on the Keystone XL pipeline, whether it is reversing the order dealing with climate change that was affecting in very significant ways those people that were producing energy, whether it's some of the issues of the fuel efficiency standards, whether it's the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Of course, another one related to abortion. Donald Trump reinstated a ban on providing federal fund to international groups to perform abortions or provide information about them. This is known as the Mexico City policy, and this is one that has been overturned as well. And so you go through 4 pages of all the things that have, in really what's about the first 90 days, have been reversed by Donald Trump. Now, is there more to do? Well, yes, one of the things we certainly would want Donald Trump to do is to actually sign that executive order on religious freedom. So that's certainly on the front burner. And, of course, one other one, which we encourage you to do as you visit the website, we have a take action item where you can contact your 2 United States senators about a vote that will take this week for Judge Neil Gorsuch. Passed out of the Senate Judiciary Committee yesterday by a vote of 11-9, which shows you right all immediately how yet you could not find one Democrat to support Neil Gorsuch. Looks like there may be 3 in the floor vote, but again, this is where you need to contact your 2 United States senators, and we've made it easy for you to do so. And as we go to our break, this would be a great time, as we have been talking about, for you to join with us on the Truth Team. This is, again, the Truth Team week that we just had, and again, we have an opportunity on the website for you to click on that banner which says Rebuilding Truth in a Post-Truth Culture. We cannot do it without you. Join the Truth Team. So for your small gift or a large gift, we've had everything from small gifts yesterday to a very large gift yesterday, but anything in between. I hope some of you might consider what you would do to join with us at $1 a day. Just $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 a year. As I said yesterday, your $360 reaches 400 people. And so if you'd like to talk to someone, the pledge line number is 800-347-5151, 1-800-347-5151. We'll be back right after this.
If you've listened for any length of time, you've probably heard about Point of View listeners who've done amazing things, started ministries, found their life's calling, impacted their city, their state, the nation. But let me be clear, you don't have to have a huge impact to be faithful. I thought about that when I read a note from Joanne in Texas. She admitted, up until recently, I've not had much of a political view, nor have I ever been so informed. But since I signed up for your email and website information, I can now get the correct information that the public is oblivious to. Joanne ended by thanking us for the Take Action section of our website, where we make it easy for you to express your views on key issues with your elected representatives. Everything we do on the air, online, through mail and email is made possible through people like you who invest in Point of View so we can invest in issues that matter. Take your place on the Truth Team. Call 1-800-347-5151 or sign up online at pointofview.net/team. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kirby Anderson.
As I mentioned last hour, we're going to spend some time today in this hour talking about religious terrorism, this very good book that I think is going to be helpful for you to understand something which sadly, some of our elected officials still don't seem to understand, that oftentimes religious ideas and terrorism go together. And the thought of connecting religious with an experience of violence is something we're going to be talking about this hour. And it is written by Robert Michael Hicks. By the way, I might mention that we have a link to his website, which is robertmichaelhicks.com, so you can find out more about this book. Few Call It War, Religious Terrorism Then and Now. Has served as a military chaplain for 32 years, a retired colonel of the U.S. Air Force, and an individual that has also been an instructor both at the undergraduate and graduate level. For example, has been an adjunct professor of history at Belhaven University in Orlando, Florida. Also the author of a number of other books you might want to check out, things like Masculine Journey and Failure to Scream. But this particular book we're going to focus our time and attention on, about 260 some odd pages. Few Call It War, Religious Terrorism Then and Now. Robert Hicks, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Oh, good to be with you, Kirby.
A fascinating book, because you not only look at Islamic terrorism, which is, even Sunni terrorism, you say, accounts for about 70% of all the terrorist activities, but we'll also get into other religious terrorism and point out that this is not something new. You can go back in the pages of history and find that religion and terrorism come together, individuals going out and doing violence and justifying that in the name of God. And so, in a sense, what you're trying to do is not only give us a history lesson, but wake us up to the reality that we're facing today.
Well, you're exactly right. And as a history instructor, my approach in the first part of the book is really to cover the history of religious violence in all the major religions, because they all have a history of using violence, of teaching violence in certain circumstances, and using their sacred literature as the grounds or ideology for why they're going to do what they are going to do. And I think one of the blinders we have on politically and militarily and even as a secular society is we approach religious terrorism purely with secular tools.
Yes.
And we don't understand the history of where this teaching of violence comes from, and therefore we don't really know how to counter it.
You know, in the first hour, we weren't necessarily connecting these two, but we were talking about protecting churches from violence and things of that nature. But even then, I said something I really think is even more appropriate now, and that is some of the people that we have in government, especially if they have a secular mindset. They don't go to church or synagogue or a mosque. They don't know anybody that does. Or even if they have maybe some kind of religious background, they may only know their particular strain of that particular religion and know nothing about. For example, Christians know oftentimes very little about Islam, for example. And so as a result, we need to have your book and this kind of teaching to remind us that this has been around for some time, and you have to really make the connection between religion and terrorism, even though lots of times people want to simply refer to it as like workplace violence or something of that nature.
But yeah, and as I talk about this in my book, an eye-opening book that I read was written by our former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright.
Yes.
And it's entitled The Mighty and the Almighty, and it's really her confession
front, I've really found it's even worse when you get, even though some sector.
Very well. Define terrorism so that we all are. How would you describe that? Because some people will say, man's freedom fighter, some of the violence that we see, then how do we really define terrorism?
Well, the definition I started with was the official definition back in 1996 when I was a student, Air Force student at the Air Force War College. It was a year of study, the senior leadership school for the Air Force, as a chaplain, the only chaplain in the courses that I took at times. And the official State Department, Department of Defense definition of terrorism went something like this. It's a political motivated violence in order to influence a political outcome. And I kept raising my hand with that definition saying, okay, you got political on both ends of that. Politically motivated violence in order to achieve a political end. And yet I was seeing all these religious connections, no matter what area of the world we were studying, that were being driven by religious ideology. And I think I finally frustrated my professor, who was a PhD, to say, well, Chaplain, how would you define it? And so the definition I start with in my book is it's religiously motivated violence to gain the honor and respect of their deity and their fellow combatants. And so this puts a focus on religion. And I think that's the blindness we have on, is we don't understand how religious violence works. And it's far often more lethal than the old secular leftist Marxist ideology of the past that generated a lot of violence.
And when we talk about religion, one of the things I appreciate about your book is you did not think that Timothy McVeigh was doing this for religious reasons. When you think about one of the largest and most visible terrorist domestic attacks, which of course was at Oklahoma City Federal Building, his was not religiously motivated. But when we come back from the break, I want to look at, if you can, maybe put your history professor's hat on for just a minute and teach us a little bit about the Zionist, about the Crusades, and then, of course, we'll get into the jihadists. So we'll, in each case, use at least one example from one of the major religions of the book to illustrate that we've had some of this in the past, and then to focus on what is happening currently and how to address that in the future. So let's take a break. We are privileged to have with us today retired Colonel Robert Michael Hicks. The book is entitled Few Call It War, Religious Terrorism Then and Now. And it really is an attempt to help us begin to think about how to put these two issues together. As he said, we don't really connect the thought of religion with the experience of violence. In fact, the two not only coexist today, but they've always coexisted. So we'll give you a little bit of a history lesson. Then we're going to look at how this is playing out in the current situation, because as you well know, we've had presidents in the past that have assured us the terrorists are not religiously motivated, or if they are religiously motivated, they've really hijacked the religion, and this is not really representative of those religious ideas. And yet, if we're going to be serious about not only fighting the war on terror, but addressing an issue that we'll be talking about more later this week on the extreme vetting that may actually take place under some of the rules by the Trump administration, we have to acknowledge that many people do have religious ideas, and we need to understand them. So we'll take a break, continue our conversation with Robert Michael Hicks right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Yesterday, I talked about entitlement addiction. Today, I want to focus on how hard it is to wean Americans off of other government programs. Joe Messina begins a column by citing some of the recommendations given by pediatricians about when to wean a young child off of breast milk. For example, a 2-year-old toddler may be more attached and less flexible about giving up breastfeeding than a 12-month-old baby. Joe then asks, sound familiar? Government programs work like this. I think we've all seen how a temporary government program becomes a permanent government program. When funding is about to run out, it gets extended. Soon, too many people use the program, and it is impossible to wean them off of the government. Do you love art and music? Then obviously you would oppose any attempt to reduce government funding of the arts. Joe Messina reminds us that programs like Sesame Street, and plays like Hamilton are making lots of money off of seed money from taxpayers. Sesame Street is worth over $400 million alone. Many programs are no longer necessary. The Rural Utilities Service was started in 1930 to get phones and electricity into rural areas. It fulfilled its mission but still exists to this day. The Rural Housing Service was created in 1949 to provide low-interest loans to farmers, but has changed its mission to provide loans to non-farm households in urban zip codes. What about all the controversy about Meals on Wheels? Joe Messina says that few cuts proposed are for duplicate programs that cover or encompass Meals on Wheels, and I doubt any of these programs will be cut by the time the budget makes its way through various congressional committees. Weaning toddlers can be difficult, but weaning dependence on the federal government seems almost impossible. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From PureFlix, The Case for Christ, based on the book by Lee Strobel. In theaters April 7th, rated PG. More information at caseforchristmovie.com. Point of View, Truth Team 360, Joseph Farah.
Well, I think Point of View is one of the first radio programs to really give us alternative news, if you will, to ferret out those stories that the so-called mainstream media would never bring to people. That is what has always made your program fascinating. It's what has always delivered the audience to you. For people who are really hungry for the real story, for real information, there is no parallel to Point of View.
So great opportunity for you to respond, as we've encouraged some of you to do. Join with us on the Truth Team line, 800-347-5151. As we mentioned, and Joseph Farah was talking about that, we're in our 45th year. Marlon Maddox started the program in 1972. Of course, it went up on satellite in the 1980s. I've been doing it for more than 30 years myself, even as first a guest host and a co-host and now the host of the program. So again, if you're today listening to some things that you haven't heard before, I hope that you'll consider what you might do to support this ministry, and you can go to the website pointofview.net or case 800-347-5151. And you might say, well, this is some new information. Maybe, of course, you've had a chance to watch Robert Hicks in the past on television or radio, because he's been on many programs, or maybe read one of his almost a dozen books. But even so, even if you've had a chance to hear a short interview with him on some of those programs, we give him a lot more time to talk about these very important issues. Colonel Robert Michael Hicks with us today as we talk about his book, Few Call It War, Religious Terrorism Then and Now, and we have a link to his website in case you can order it. And Colonel Hicks, if for just a minute, I know you serve as an adjunct professor of history at Belhaven University. Give us a little bit of a history lesson, because when we go back to the Middle East and the religions of the Middle East, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, we recognize that terrorism has existed in the past, hasn't it?
Oh, certainly. Both the long ago past and more recent activities from the 50s on. You alluded to Timothy McVeigh, and certainly one of the urban myths out there is there's no difference between a Timothy McVeigh and an Osama bin Laden. And certainly McVeigh is sometimes articulated by the secular press as a religious terrorist. But when we really dig a little bit deeper into his background, we find he was a loner. He was raised Catholic, but apparently had no connection to any organized religion as an adult. At the most, he had a conspiracy of himself and a couple of army buddies. His ideology was certainly not from anything religious, but from racist, white supremacist material, particularly a book called The Turner Diaries. He lived off the land and his buddies. He was a U.S. soldier in the first Gulf War, community college dropout, and certainly became, in the Oklahoma City bombing, a mass murderer. So, and to me, he was just a plain old criminal. I would not call him a religious terrorist, but when we compare him to an Osama bin Laden, who had large, huge support from his fellow Wahhabis in the Gulf states, a faithful practitioner of the Wahhabi religion. In fact, his organization is called by some Holy War, Inc. He believed in the purest form of Islam, inherited millions from his dad, and saw himself as a soldier fighting Israel in the West, and was a graduate of King Abdullah Aziz University. And so, to me, to compare these two, it's very clear Osama is a religious terrorist, and McVeigh certainly wasn't. So often, Christian identity movement, which is largely a white supremacist, racist movement that tries to utilize Scripture, I don't call that at all religious terrorism. But when we look at backgrounds in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Shintoism, they've all had long traditions of using violence not only to defend their own faith and countries, but also to extend in an imperial way. Most recently is World War II, and we saw how the role the emperor worship and Shinto religion played in World War II with Japan. And we forget that there was a religious component to World War II, at least in the Japanese field. And then, of course, we come to the Jewish faith, and probably the most remarkable, almost unfortunate thing that happened was an assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, the Prime Minister of Israel, by a right-wing, radical, Talmud-quoting, Talmud-studying religious student at the Bar Ilan University. And he was just the tip of an iceberg of a huge movement of radical Jewish people that sometimes get equated with the settlement movement, but certainly they are led and taught by rabbis that know their scriptures thoroughly and would justify violence in the name of their God. So to me, this is a long history. I don't have time to go into all the background of where it came from, but certainly if I was a guru wanting to get a group of people to do something destructive to any society, all I have to do is reach back into that history, quote some of their scholars, take some text out of context, and then use them to justify violence.
Let's, if we can, you talked about that, and of course you have a whole chapter there on the Jewish fist and some of that, but real quickly, it might be worth just also mentioning, before, of course, obviously you spend a lot of time on Islam, to talk about the Crusades, because you have a section there about the late Middle Ages and the Crusades to retake the Holy Land. I think that takes us back to 1095, but how do we think through that? And then out of that came the idea of this just war theory. So give us a little history lesson there, if you might.
Well, I was part of a team that was teaching the first the Air Force advisors that were going to Iraq and Afghanistan to help them stand up their air forces. And I was teaching on Middle East history. And I still remember the day I put up a map of the Middle East prior to the Crusades. And it was a map dated from a little bit before 600 A.D., and I just did it up there, and this is pure history. I said, whose land was this? And, of course, it was the Byzantine Christian empire. North Africa, the Middle East, all the way through the Balkans, even parts of Russia. And then I overlapped that after the Muslims took over, and I said, okay, what does this say to us? And actually, the reaction I got was surprising. It was from my fellow Air Force officers that thought I was really not being politically correct and sensitive, and the two Iraqi translator females I had in there who were Muslims were most interested in this history.
Yes. Yeah, well, again, we need to know our history because we need to know that there was a time when you had Christians in the Middle East, then you had Christians and I use Christian in the broadest sense of the word, by the way, take that back, and then Saladin takes it back again, and then you have the Byzantine Empire, and until the end of World War I, you really had kind of this caliphate that was part of the Ottoman Empire. And if you don't know your history, which sadly I have to say, Robert Hicks, a lot of these young people don't know their history, even some adults don't know their history, then you are going to stumble into all sorts of problems, aren't you?
Oh, sure, and we don't do history today, and that's the blinder, another blinder we have on. But the question that really raised the ire of my fellow students that I had there was when I raised the fact, I said, I'm frankly surprised that the Christians in Europe waited almost 200 to 300 years before they tried to take it back.
Yes. Well, again, there's some great material there. By the way, in my book, Biblical Point of View on Islam, I have a whole chapter there on the Crusades. But let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about Islam because that is a significant chapter in your book. And again, also the question, are all terrorists and religions the same? Really good piece there, and a couple of other issues. And just as we go to the break, let me just mention that I've been following the career of Robert Hicks for many years because his book, Masculine Journey, Understanding the 6 Stages of Manhood, is something I was teaching about many years ago in the 1990s, if you can understand that. So for those of you that have a men's ministry, you might look up that book as well, because I found that very helpful and have taught for it. And I think I even have some PowerPoint presentations related to it. And so in addition to obviously speaking to this issue of history and terrorism, he's written quite a number of other books, and I might commend that one to you. As we go to a break, we have some information that you can follow so that you can know more about this book. We have a link to his website, robertmichaelhicks.com. You don't have to even spell it all out. Just click the See More button next to his picture there, and it will take you there. And as you go to the website, once again, I'm challenging some of you to consider what you might do to support this ministry. We have a banner there that simply says, Rebuilding Truth in a Post-Truth Culture. And we are encouraging you to join the Truth Team. You can join it for just a one-time gift, but I'm also at least challenging some of you to think about giving $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 a year. We've had some people join at the $10 a month level. We've had some people join at the $100 a month level. I'll let you figure out what you want to do, but if you can help us out, that's where you can hear these kinds of programs. And again, you can go to the website, pointofview.net, or the pledge line number is 800-347-5151. If you'd like to talk to someone, 800-347-5151. We'll continue our conversation with Robert Hicks right after this.
From PureFlix comes The Case for Christ. An investigative reporter on a quest to disprove his wife's newfound faith comes face to face with an unexpected outcome.
How can we even talk about historical evidence for the resurrection?
The empty tomb is based on evidence. And isn't evidence your trade?
Based on the best-selling book by Lee Strobel, The Case for Christ. In theaters April 7th. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. More information is available at thecaseforchristmovie.com.
Christianity is based in history, on evidence, and all truth revealed in God's Word is for our good, not just spiritually, but in every way. Point of View's mission is to restore God's truth in our culture, and to do it effectively, we need you as a partner. Your gift helps inspire people, young and old, from coast to coast to rebuild truth in their communities. Join the Truth Team today at pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Get off the sidelines. Pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kirby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today with Robert Michael Hicks. The book is entitled Few Call It War, Religious Terrorism Then and Now. Let me also open up the phones in case you'd like to address this issue of, especially as we're going to focus now on Muslim terrorism. You could certainly give us a call, and this is the on-air number, 1-800-351-1212, 351-1212. Going to look at chapters 9 and following in the book, and that gets us into the whole idea of Islamic jihad. And just as Protestant had a Protestant Reformation, Islam had kind of a reformation or a revolution with Wahhabi, and then, of course, with all sorts of other Islamic leaders. And so what you have today are different strains of Islam, and one of those strains, especially in the Sunni Muslim strain, recognizes the value of fighting against of the infidel, the pagan. And unfortunately, Robert Hicks, we have had presidents and members of Congress and even people in the Defense Department that want to say that this is just an aberration. This is not really religiously motivated. Yet as I read your book, we can see the religious roots of some of these terrorist activities, can't we?
Yes, indeed. And I must express I was a little disappointed when I heard our brand new National Security Agency director, advisor to President Trump, say that ISIS is not Islamic. And I thought, oh my gosh, here we go again.
Here we go again. Yeah, we've heard that from the previous president and from some of the people in his administration. The Islamic State is not Islamic. What? Yeah, go ahead.
It's like somebody, maybe a Muslim or from the Jewish faith, saying, well, you're not a true evangelical or fundamentalist as a Christian. Well, who are you to tell me what I'm not? Or what I am? And when we look at all the way back into the 13th century, we find that there were some radicals back then that were labeled as heretics. One in particular, a guy by the name of Ibn Taymiyyah in about the 1200s. Mm-hmm. Believed that jihad should be the sixth pillar of Islam. 5 pillars, basically covering prayer and giving alms and making Mecca, pilgrimage to Mecca and these things. And he was really refuted until you had a reformation within Islam, which was called the literacy movement or the translation movement, beginning in Baghdad, which began to translate the works of the Greeks and the Romans, and that is what the claim to fame of the golden age of Islam is all about, when the Beit Hakim, the House of Wisdom, drew in scholars from all over the world, many Jewish, many Christian, and Islamic scholars that began to translate because the Muslims could not translate anything from Greek and Latin or Hebrew. And that was stopped by one cleric by the name of Al-Ghazali a little bit later. And he was basically a skeptic about scholarship, and that was the end of that Reformation. And most of the well that the Islamists today drink from Wahhabi and Saudi Arabia, Qaradawi, the Muslim Brotherhood, Hassan al-Banna and Abdullah Azzam, who influenced bin Laden, drink at those wells of Ibn Taymiyyah and Al-Ghazali. And until we understand what they taught and how widely their teaching it was expressed, all the way down to a guy in the 1950s, Saeed Qutb, who wrote a book called Milestones, who came to study in America and was planning to go back and become the director of education for the country of Egypt. But when he looked at America, he came to the conclusion that the West is the problem and Islam is the solution. And he goes back and joins the Muslim Brotherhood and becomes one of the chief ideologues. Now, these are not stupid people. They're all clerics. They're all well-read. They're university-trained. And so to say that ISIS is not Islamic when they have the Quran memorized, they know the Hadiths better than any of us, and how the arrogance that we have even to make that statement amazes me. It takes somebody else who's an equal scholar to evaluate that.
And again, you mentioned Syed Qutb. He was in Colorado, sees dancing, and back then it probably wasn't as seductive as it was now, but the 1950s and jazz and rock and dancing were enough for him to leave that. But back to the point that you were making, this is another one of those myths that spread all the time, Robert Hicks, and that is what we're dealing with here are uneducated, poor individuals who have no future, so that's why they go into radicalism. Well, first of all, think of the financial wealth of Osama bin Laden. Think of the education that you just talked about a minute ago. If you look at some of the individuals and part of the Muslim Brotherhood, they have good credentials, or even if they don't have Western credentials, they're very intelligent people. So this myth that these are just poor, uneducated individuals that sort of stumble into radicalism really doesn't wash when we look at it historically, does it?
You're exactly right. And I think it's our secular, progressive blinders that we have on, that we want to look at the world the way we want to look at the world, rather than seeing what I say, 2/3 of this world is religious. And yet what we have got is a secular approach that ignores religion, minimizes religions, marginalizes religion as if it has no importance to play in any of the public sector. And so, consequently, we fight terrorism with Predator firing Hellfire missiles. And I'm not sure, as of yet, I see any better strategy. One of the things I write about in my book is the absolute failure to deal with Islamic terrorism at the ideological level.
Mm-hmm.
The old Cold War, we know who the enemy was. They knew we were their enemy, and we fought an ideological battle with Radio Free Europe. We were blasting into the Eastern Europe parts of the Soviet Union every day, trying to show that our ideals and values were superior to theirs. But we don't know how to do that and can't do that because of political correctness with Islam. Can you imagine anybody in any university or think tank in D.C. making a public statement that we think Christianity has better values than Islam?
That would be tough. But, at least a point of some optimism. Sebastian Gorka and a few others have talked about that. But it's few and far between. And so, again, we recognize that there's a battle, and it's a really important point because, again, with your Christian background, you recognize that we fight a physical battle, but we also fight a spiritual, intellectual battle. And certainly boots on the ground, doing things to begin to disrupt terror networks, very important. But also the ideological component is important as well. And I think that at the very least, we should find those individuals that might be identified as moderate Muslims to be in alliance with us to begin to counter some of this toxic ideology that leads to terrorism. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we have silenced a lot of them by mere fact that the radical Islamists have put the fear of God, literally, into their souls. And my view is, I know why most Muslims are in this country. They're here for the same reasons any other person wants to come to our country, for a better life, for better education, opportunities for their children. But as some writers have brought out, the fact that, my former, writes it forward in my book, former State Department and FBI guy, he says behind every terrorist is either a mosque or an imam, someplace.
Yes.
And you may have moderate Muslims that just want to be good Americans and maintain their Muslim faith, but if they are going to a mosque, and if what I quote in my book is correct, I think it is, that 80% of the mosques in America have been funded by Saudi Arabia money, and their clerics trained over there, then what they're going to hear in the Sunday sermon, or the Friday sermon, is not about tolerance, but it's a more radical message. And for that reason, I think to stay in this country and live under a non-Islamic government, to either finance jihad, to be sympathetic toward jihad, or to actually do jihad, gives them a right to stay in this country and live under a non-Islamic government, because ultimately their goal is to create one. And that's the message that I think we are trying to investigate, particularly in law enforcement, and to come to grips with. But I think the moderates are there, but they haven't gotten a strong enough voice yet.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll also talk about some of the commonalities that we see here. But again, we have to pay attention to some of the very toxic messages that are out there, and even what's in the heads of individuals. When we talk about the shooting at Fort Hood with Major Hassan, or the Boston Marathon. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have one of the survivors from the Boston Marathon bombing in studio with me on Thursday, the woman that lost her leg. And if you've seen the movie, The Patriot Day, you will be familiar with who she is. Or the shooting of the 4 Marines and the sailor at the military sites in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and on and on. The list just goes on of all those actions. We see that we are also, in some cases, a breeding ground here in the United States. But we'll continue our conversation in just a minute with Robert Hicks, talk about some of the commonalities and similarities, and then finish off the program. We'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Thomas Altman, Kristen Larson, and Kenneth Yackley were employed by the Minnesota Department of Corrections. Like many government agencies do, the state agency assembled employees for training on non-discrimination in the workplace. Well, these employees did not agree with the politically correct bent of this particular training, but they were nonetheless required to attend. While several employees disliked the training out of sheer boredom, Altman and his colleagues had a moral objection to the content of the training. So ahead of the training, the 3 agreed to participate minimally and read their Bibles silently to themselves. While they read their Bibles in silent protest, other employees nodded off, did paperwork, or read a secular publication of some sort. After the training session, the 3 Bible-reading employees were issued a letter of reprimand. Those who fell asleep or read the newspaper or did paperwork were not punished at all. So Altman and friends sued the Department of Corrections. The Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit sent the case back to the district court, noting that the court should have allowed the jury to determine whether the employer was motivated to punish these employees because of their religious activity. Religious discrimination in the workplace is unlawful, but sometimes it takes a jury to determine whether an employer's actions were motivated by hostility toward religion. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Point of View. Truth Team 360.
Just want to thank you so much for providing this sort of media outlet. I am a journalist turned stay-at-home mother. I consider it a promotion, and programs like yours help me to stay connected and to keep my mind sharp.
Thank you again for the great work you're doing. I mean, it's very inspirational, and it helps me go on day to day and know what my purpose is and have faith.
I just wanted to tell you, too, how much I have appreciated Point of View over the years, and it has caused me over time to call my representatives and take action that I would never have had the knowledge to do before. I've always been taught that we take care of our own, and I feel like Point of View is one of our own because of the Christian worldview that you do promote. And so I have become a partner today, and I just want to thank you so much.
Kirby, you're one of the only ones out there that I can really trust, because I really feel like you and your staff do a good job researching and getting the facts that you lay out there before.
Point of View. Truth Team 360.
Let me encourage you to go to the website and find out a little bit more, not only about this book, Few Call It War, but also to click on that banner that just says Join the Truth Team. And for your gift, we certainly would say thank you. And you're helping other individuals to begin to learn about this, as well as we're trying to educate you and equip you and empower you to make a difference. Even one of the callers there talked about how we also encourage you to take action. And our action item here is to call your 2 United States senators, or actually we've made it very easy for you. Just contact them by email about the confirmation hearings that have taken place for Judge Neil Gorsuch, and the vote will be taking place this week. So we make it real easy for you. It's all available at the website, pointofview.net. I'll have more to say about that in just a minute, but let me again mention that not only this book by Robert Hicks, but his previous books, for those of you especially involved in a men's ministry, Uneasy Manhood, Masculine Journey. Of course, you also had a feminine journey that you did with your wife. Just some great books, and those are all available that you can find out at his website. But Robert, for just a few more minutes, let's talk about some of the commonalities. Even though these different groups theologically are very different, maybe even sometimes philosophically, you've seen some common elements, haven't you?
Yeah, I have 7 of them, I think, listed in my book. And let me just pick up a couple. They kind of relate to the past and the future. All religions have a golden age mythology that they're trying to get back to. In Islam, it's the golden age of Islam, when they controlled the Middle East and North Africa and had their centers in Spain and Baghdad and Damascus to get back to that caliphate. And so, that's what makes ISIS so very powerful, is the concept of the caliphate being restored. For the radical Jewish people in Israel, they want to restore Jerusalem to the dimensions of the land that was promised Abraham, and that drives a lot of their thinking. For Christians, we want to get back to when Christianity was great. This is the 500th year of the Reformation, and I've got friends that want to get back to colonial America, Puritanism. We've all got a date back there. Some probably like to get back to the 1950s. And that sets us up then to a heroic leader that's going to give us a vision on how to get back to that. And linked with that is apocalypticism, that our time is short, that the Mahdi is coming, or Jesus is coming, the rapture can take place at any time, and of course the Messiah could come with the Jewish people. And so it's that tension between trying to get back to something we have lost and a vision for the future, that bad things are coming and we better get ready for it, and because time is really short and we need to prepare for that. So it breeds those commonalities, but just because there's things in common doesn't mean that all these religious people are the same, and these gurus.
Not at all. Let me just mention that we have a link to your website, and before I let you go, let's talk about that, because it's robertmichaelhicks.com, and there's a place where people can buy the book. There's some reviews. There's a place where people can contact you. And then, of course, a lot of your previous books that I've mentioned there as well. So if somebody would want to have you come and speak, if they would like to get some other books, or they'd like to get some information about this book, talk about what's available on your website right there.
Well, it's got my bios and how to contact me, and the books that I've written, several men's issue books, and one with my wife you've mentioned. Also, kind of from my military background, become sort of, I hate to say an expert, but on critical incident stress and PTSD issues, having done a lot of writing and speaking on the wars that we've been fighting in the last decade. So all that material is there, along with some pictures of me and various roles that I've played. So I encourage anybody that's interested to go to it.
Well, again, I've followed your career. I think one of those books came out in the early 1990s, so that's almost 25 years ago. So I've been following your career for some time, and it's just great to have you on the program. Thank you for writing this book, Few Call It War, Religious Terrorism Then and Now. We have a link to your website, and so thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Oh, great to be with you, Kirby. Thank you.
Robert Hicks. And again, we have all that information on our website. And let me just mention, as you go to the website, that's one of the things that you are supporting, not just the 2-hour radio program, but we have not only this website, but one that I will certainly try to spend a little more time talking about tomorrow. We've developed a very millennial-friendly website. And so with our Millennial Roundtable tomorrow, we'll talk about not only many of the articles that we take from this website, but put them in a kind of a millennial-friendly format, but we'll also have some videos. Matter of fact, we actually are now adding some videos from Nick Pitts and Allie Beth Stuckey and other individuals. So this is another aspect of this. If you find yourself saying, well, I'd like to listen to the program again, of course, you can click on the watch or listen buttons, and then you can either download a podcast or watch it again. We also have, of course, mentioned that we have an app that you can put on your phone, which allows you not only to watch the program and to listen to the program, but to donate to the program. And so all of those resources are available there, as well as many of the videos that we post on our YouTube channel. So I hope that you see that this is worthy of your financial investment. And we're involved, as we've said, in trying to rebuild truth in a post-truth culture. As we mentioned even yesterday, this was the word of the year from the Oxford Dictionary. And it was kind of funny, I'm mentioning the Oxford Dictionary as I'm sitting across from somebody who has all of his advanced degrees from the University of Cambridge and also as a lecturer at the Tyndale House there at Cambridge. But nevertheless, just a reminder of the need of the hour. We certainly recognize that the world we are in today is different. Our culture and our country are not necessarily always moving towards biblical values, oftentimes seemingly moving in the opposite direction. That's why in the first hour I wanted to just read a few of the things that have happened, even under the administration. And I recognize that, as I've said so many times before, politics is downstream from culture. So it is important for us to have the right ideas, to communicate those in our communities, in our churches, in our families, and to really educate the next generation. So if you really believe in what we're doing, even though we're going off the air, I hope that some of you will either go to the website, pointofview.net, and click on that banner and make a gift. And it can be of any size. Some of you have made a one-time gift. Many of you have been willing to give us a monthly gift and pledge. You don't have to have all the money right now, obviously, but we are recognizing that monthly supporters are really helpful because our actual expense come in monthly, and so if our income comes in monthly, we do a much better job of meeting those financial needs. So again, you can go to the website, pointofview.net. Also, of course, the pledge line is going to stay open for just a little bit longer, so if you'd like to join us, 800-347-5151. Let me say thank you to those of you that joined with us last week. But if you haven't had a chance to do so, or maybe even today, if you've heard some of the conversation we've had about how to protect your church, some of the conversation we've had about religious terrorism, I hope that you'll take the time to give us a call, 800-347-5151. As I mentioned, tomorrow is our Millennial Roundtable discussion. I've already posted a number of articles that we're going to be discussing with Nick Pitts and Allie Beth Stuckey, but we also would love to chat with you as well, so we are looking forward to that. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Shamila for the help behind the scenes. We'll see you back here tomorrow for our Millennial Weekend program, and we look forward to seeing you then.
Does Point of View make any difference? I think Dr. Eric Walsh would say it does. Dr. Walsh was fired from his job as District Health Director for the state of Georgia, not because of anything he did or failed to do on the job, but because of sermons he preached in his local church. What does that have to do with Point of View? Jeremy Dyes of First Liberty represented Dr. Walsh, and in February, the state of Georgia paid a large settlement for their religious discrimination. And Jeremy Dyes became an attorney specializing in defending religious liberty greatly because of what he learned listening to Point of View radio as a child. That is the kind of difference you make when you support the Truth Team, but we can't make that difference without your help. Become a partner today in this important mission of speaking truth in love. Join the Truth Team at pointofview.net/team. Choose your giving level, stretch a bit, and please do it today. Or call 800-347-5151. Pointofview.net/team. Or 800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.